It's very easy to see how Indiana becomes a dynasty in college football.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I know, it's a crazy thing to say. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Notre Dame's schedule. Those are my official thoughts. I'm just going to do that for 8 to 10 minutes in the second segment. Not actually. And we've got a court date for Trinidad Chambliss and a coordinator hire to keep an eye on in Columbus. But first, the Indiana Hoosiers. It's still the most incredible college football story and maybe sports story that I have ever seen, that most of you have probably ever seen. I mean, the Hoosiers being the first team to go 16-0 since I don't even know when. I think there was a Yale team. It didn't count. It was so long ago, we can all acknowledge, even though there's no official line of demarcation, it was so long ago, it doesn't actually count. They go 16-0, roll their way to a national championship, played what looked like a C plus B minus game against a darn good Miami team, and still wound up winning the game and felt like they were in control. Yeah. That's all the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's really easy to lay out right now, being a prisoner of the moment, how Indiana becomes a college football dynasty, how they win a national championship once every 2 to 3 years. It was very easy to make the same case about Georgia just a couple of seasons ago. And here's where I'm hesitant to say this is automatically going to be the case. And I'm someone who loves Curt Cignetti, who thinks they are built the right way, that their talent identification and development is better than any other program in college football. And then there's another factor that I can throw on top of it here and actually, you know what? I'll do it first. We'll get it all out of the way. All of the reasons why Indiana can be a dynasty in the sport, whatever you define that as, they're right there in front of you. Great coach. Already got one, adaptable, got support. Had you even known, did you know, is the correct way to phrase that. English is hard sometimes. Did you even know before this national title run for the Hoosiers that Mark Cuban was an Indiana alum? I didn't know that. I did not know that. And he's started to pay attention a little bit more. Go watch his interview he did the day before the national championship game on First Take, talking about how he got to be involved with the Indiana program. If the Hoosiers are suddenly able, with a vast alumni network, and we know they've got rabid fans who will travel to any stadium and will certainly pack Bloomington every time there's a big game that rolls into town, What exactly are you missing? You've got the ability to get the guys every single year. If they now have their own Cody Campbell or Phil Knight or any other long line of donors that have funded wildly successful programs, and you also happen to have the best coach in college football, yeah, it's really easy to see how they can become a dynasty. Heck, they haven't had a top 25 high school recruiting class in I don't even know how long. I mean, Indiana's never been on my radar from a recruiting standpoint. And now as we go into the offseason, I'm fascinated to see how it goes. Their transfer portal class, as I've talked about, is knocking it out of the park. Josh Hoover from TCU at quarterback. Nick Marsh from Michigan State at wide receiver. Feels like a perfect stylistic fit. Omar Cooper officially declared for the NFL draft. No surprise there. They're going to be just fine. Shaz Preston comes over from Tulane. I think he can be good. A.J. Harris, the corner from Penn State. Hit after hit after hit. Let me just throw this out there, though. I'm playing devil's advocate for a moment. Why? Because this happens a lot in sports. College football, you go to any sport, any league, And you can find an example of what you're talking about. Yes, as Indiana has just completed the most improbable, unthinkable, seemingly impossible climb to the top of the mountain, long before a lot of programs have been able to get there, either ever or in a very long time. Indiana's won a national championship more recently than Texas. Who's more committed than Texas? Texas is defined by great barbecue, everything is better, and football. And football's probably too low on that list. And Indiana has won a title more recently than them. There are a lot of other examples that I can point to, and it'll underscore the exact same point. It's totally ridiculous. Think back, though, to just a few seasons ago. Georgia had won back-to-back national championships. Back-to-back. Since then, they haven't won a playoff game. Pretty crazy to think about, isn't it? They lost the SEC championship, missed the 4-team playoff. They lost in the quarterfinals last year to Notre Dame. They lost in the quarterfinals this year. So, what looked like the next dynasty, it had a Saban disciple and still does as its head coach, who we know is a good head coach. They acquire talent as well as anybody in the country. I mean, it's Georgia, for goodness sake. They had waited and waited and waited in Athens for a national championship. They win 2 in a row. Certainly, they're not going anywhere. And maybe if the 12-team playoff had started 1 year earlier, then they would have gone on to win it up. Maybe they would have made a run. We'll never know. Good thing the playoff expanded in time for Ohio State, or they wouldn't have had the opportunity. Those are hypotheticals. Let's deal in the world of reality. My point in comparing Indiana to Georgia is that you don't know what hurdles are going to arise in the sport. Look at the landscape. Think about how you feel about college football right now. There is no consistency or stability or continuity in a lot of different areas. In some, certainly there are. Cignetti being the best head coach in the country, that's not going to change in the next couple of seasons. In a sport where I can't even tell you 1 year from now what the following playoff format will be, we just found out that it'll stay at 12 teams for this year. We don't know what sorts of challenges are going to arise. So are the fundamentals there? Yes, absolutely. By the way, I was rocking my Seahawks jersey yesterday on the show. At the height of the Legion of Boom, everything seemed possible. Wasn't going anywhere. Defense wins championships. Remember, you never know. You just never know, because it all came crumbling down with the worst decision in the history of sports. The worst play call in the history of sports. What happens when Curt Cignetti loses his coordinators? That's going to happen. Maybe that'll be the moment that Indiana comes back to reality and becomes a good program, but not a dynasty in the sport. And how do you even define a dynasty? Indiana's off to a really good start. Curt Cignetti has lost 2 games to teams that have played in the national title game in his 2 seasons. That's it. Those are the only teams that he's lost football games to. What happens if they start recruiting at a top 10, 15 level? And they're not doing it just because Mark Cuban's given them a bunch of money, but because they actually have the ability now to go out and sell some highly rated recruits on the vision they have for Indiana Hoosiers football. It's going to take time for players at the high school level to work that into their psyche. You can't just overnight change your brand. Now, you win a national championship. It's taken 2 years, but now Indiana's got a brand. Indiana's got a profile. What happens if they start rolling in top 10 classes and Curt Cignetti isn't doing more with what some perceive to be a little bit less? What if he's able to do more with athletes of equal caliber all over the field? And he doesn't have to rely on 22, 23, or 24-year-old transfers. What happens then? We're going to find out. Curt Cignetti's had the same coaching staff for 2 years. He'll have the same one in 2026. What happens when he loses them? How important is Bryant Haynes to the success of the Indiana Hoosiers? We are going to find out. It is easy to look at Indiana and say they've got the fundamentals because I just laid out the data points of how many different ways Indiana can sustain success at a high level. What challenges are going to arise? What's the hurdle they're going to have to get over? We'll wait and find out. I don't know if that comes off as anti-Hoosiers. It's not. Because I love Curt Cignetti. He's awesome. I mean, if not only for the memes, man. I mean, come on. What do you not like about this guy? He just shows up and he wins. You all know what you can do with Curt Cignetti's name. Enter it into a certain browsing website. Yeah. Anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. Notre Dame schedule. Ridiculous. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what is on the screen. And the moment that defines this college football season, that was about more than just scoring points. It was about revolutionizing the culmination of an unbelievable series of events that led to Indiana winning the national championship. That was Fernando Mendoza's quarterback draw on 4th and 5. Mike Shanahan, gutsy. I mean, if that play call doesn't work, you are ripped up and down forever. But it worked out. Fernando Mendoza moved the Hoosiers forward, literally and metaphorically, and that reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the field, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire. This is just all Indiana football in a nutshell. That grit and that I never quit mentality. That is what Mendoza and Mazda embody. How about that alliteration? They put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. The Notre Dame schedule is not the weakest thing that I have ever seen. That's not what I find to be inherently ridiculous with it. What I find to be ridiculous is that if Notre Dame is inside the committee's top 12 rankings, they automatically get a spot. Okay. At 11-1, I would put Notre Dame inside the top 12 with this schedule. At 10-2, they better not be there. And this is an interesting time to bring up a couple conversations that I've had before on the show, one more than the others. One, a few of you feel very strongly about, which I understand, which is preseason rankings shouldn't exist. If ever there was a textbook example of why that should be the case, Notre Dame's schedule right up there, near the top of the list. Because they will get a lot of preseason hype, which, based on the model of how the sport operates, yeah, they kind of should. Because I think Notre Dame was a really good team this past year. I think Notre Dame will be a really good team this upcoming year. The problem I have is that when I look at how to decide who should make the college football playoff, I want the most deserving teams, not who I believe is the best, because that makes the outcomes on the field matter the most above all else, regular season urgency, and so on and so on. So the folks that want to get rid of them, Notre Dame might be your best example here. Now, if the Irish go 11-1 or 12-0 on this schedule, then guess what? No one, myself included, is going to have any right to rip the committee for putting Notre Dame in the playoff because of the automatic rule. That doesn't mean the automatic rule should be there. I have lobbied against auto bids for a very long time. I don't think anyone should automatically get in. And yet there are 4.5 automatic. Check that. Let me backtrack there a little bit. There are 5.5 automatic bids. The Group of 5, the Power 4 champions, and then Notre Dame if they're inside the top 12. That's the half. Yeah, not a fan. Not a fan of that whatsoever. But hey, that's just me. If you haven't memorized Notre Dame's schedule, don't worry. I have it pulled it up here right in front of me. They open with Wisconsin. And look, when they scheduled that game, Wisconsin was probably a much more prideful program than they have been the last couple of years under Luke Fickell, who is still there for reasons that go beyond my personal comprehension of college football. But, when they announced he'd return, he did indeed spur them on to a couple of wins. Yay, I guess? Sure. Then they play Rice. Okay, it's a group of 5. I'm not blasting you for that. Michigan State. All right, not exactly going after the heavy hitters of the Big Ten, but at least, trying a look at Purdue. Well, really? I mean, sure, you got 3 Big Ten teams on there. Are you going to throw in, I don't know, one of the really good ones? Apparently not. Is scheduling easy? No, it's not. It's why teams shouldn't control their own schedules, as I've said many, many times. They then go at North Carolina. I don't see any losses there. They host Stanford. Nope, that's not going to happen. Oh man. I cannot express in words the level of excitement that I have for October 17th when Notre Dame goes at BYU. I mean, that might be the most talked about non-conference game on this show in the lead up to the season. There's a very real chance that is the case. Because Notre Dame was likely going to play BYU in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, bailed out for reasons that I don't think were very good. And now we'll just schedule BYU, which brings me to the other point I want to bring up. All the folks out there who are either operating under the misconception or who wholeheartedly believe, well, you can't just schedule games a year in advance. You can't just make it happen on such short notice. When did this BYU game get scheduled? Oh, that's right, this offseason. Wow, it's crazy. It's almost like it's totally feasible and can totally be done. And we could use it to make college football schedules better. Because frankly, if this schedule had been set 5 years ago, I would have looked at Wisconsin and Michigan State and said, oh, Notre Dame's playing 2 interesting games in its first 3. But then you realize, no, they're actually not doing that. Because last year, Michigan State fired their head coach, so Pat Fitzgerald is in year 1, and Wisconsin is just trying to not be a bottom dweller here. So I don't really fault Notre Dame for that part of it, because normally Wisconsin or Michigan State is reliable, can be counted upon, is what I was trying to say, to be a top 25 caliber program. They happen to not be right now. This is, though, my objection with how we schedule games in college football. You are not going to watch a Notre Dame football game, most of you, until they are either in an unexpectedly close game in the fourth quarter. Maybe Barry Odom's got something cooking for him in West Lafayette on September 26th. Or Notre Dame's going to do what they should, which is roll through teams that they're significantly better than, and then they're going to play BYU on October 17th, and without knowing the entire schedule, which we can't right now, I'll just say game day in Provo would be pretty darn sweet. So that game, man, that it's in Provo too is sensationally good, because BYU fans can chirp at Notre Dame. There'll be plenty of hype. That's going to be good couple of young quarterbacks, CJ Carr, Bear Bachmeier. Is it 2026 yet? No, unfortunately. Well, it is, just not for the college football season. So then Notre Dame gets a little, what do we call it? Scheduling break, because they go by, and after they play at BYU, they front-loaded their schedule with their road games. They play 3 road games in 4 weeks. And then they don't play another road game until November 28th. October 17th is the last true road game Notre Dame will play until November 28th. But if they were to go 10-2, I bet they'd be inside the top 12 and automatically make the playoff. If they go 11-1, I will argue they should be in the playoff, because that means they have lost either to BYU or Miami, maybe SMU, who knows. but they end Navy in a road conference or in a non-conference game at Gillette Stadium, I believe. I might need to double check that real quick. Okay, I was correct. That's a neutral site game at Gillette Stadium. Didn't want to get that one wrong. Something just misfired in my head a little bit there. Anyway, we recenter. 3 straight home games in 3 weeks. Miami, Boston College, SMU, and then they go at Syracuse. At 11-1, I will advocate, or 12-0, obviously, I will advocate that Notre Dame makes the college football playoff. At 10-2, I don't want to see that automatically be a bid. I really don't. And that Notre Dame can schedule teams on short notice just goes to show that they could try and find bigger games out there. Look, maybe they have. Maybe Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Purdue were the only Big Ten teams that had a game available. This is why we just need Stanford to get back to being what Stanford used to be. All right, Andrew Luck and Tavita Pritchard, the ball is in your court. So, speaking of court, look at that. That was an accidental, perfect segue to Trinidad Chambliss. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, like I could do from this very chair where I record the show. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. turbotax.com/local. Don't you just love legal conversations? I'm Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On College Football and college football legal podcast correspondent. That's what it feels like I'm turning into a little bit here. So if you were really hoping to get quick resolution on one of the most consequential decisions in recent memory in college football, you're not getting it immediately. You'll get it eventually, but you know, the gears of justice, as I mentioned, they can churn a little slowly sometimes. So Ole Miss's quarterback is going to wait until February 12th. And that's just when the motion for a preliminary injunction will be heard at Calhoun County Courthouse, 9:30 a.m. local time. Those documents were filed on January 26th, and so here we go. I don't know if the ruling actually will arise that day. I'm not, obviously. I did think about once upon a time becoming a lawyer. You have to have oratory skills. Obviously, I've developed a few of those over the years. You also have to be really good at reading comprehension. I am average at best. That's how I scored on my SATs. Pretty average in that regard. So I think I'm better off doing this, and I also find this to be, yes, significantly much more enjoyable, except for the fact that these two worlds are now colliding. I have multiple friends who are lawyers. I should give them a call. You know what? I will later. Anyway, so Chambliss is seeking another year of eligibility, and I'm really Jekyll and Hyde on this whole situation, because as a general principle, I'm not a fan of this trend of 6th and 7th and 8th year quarterbacks. I have no earthly idea how TJ Finley is still playing college football. That makes no sense. He's on his 7th school in 7 years. What are we doing? How is that allowed to progress? I am not entirely certain on that front. I'm not certain at all, as a matter of fact. So that's my baseline operating principle. However, I am not immune to having my principles softened, amended, altered, or had an exception made for when there is a compelling argument in favor of something else. Chambliss is seeking a 6th year of eligibility. There was some mishandling or miscommunication of financial records or identification of documents and whatnot. I don't need to give you all that stuff here to wrap today's show. I love watching Trinidad Chambliss play football. I also don't want there to be a consistent ring of 6th, 7th, 8th year quarterbacks that are just dominating the sport out there. I think the sport should just go to 5 and done, no exceptions. That's it. 5 years of eligibility. If you get hurt, that's one of your year. You can play as many games as you want. That's how I would do it. They say you get 5 seasons, and you've got to play 3 before you can go to the NFL. But no extra years, no nothing, blanket rule. That's been tossed around, discussed at higher levels, hasn't actually come to fruition there. So I think there is a case, but I'm not the one to make it. Obviously, that's why I'm doing this and the lawyers are doing what they are paid to do. February 12th, that's when the preliminary injunction gets filed in court. We're still waiting on Darian Mensah. We're still waiting on Trinidad Chambliss, and it's not overstating things to say that these legal outcomes will shape the national title picture in college football. That's the wonderful sport that we've got. Someone else who's looking to do that is Arthur Smith, the former, Titans head coach, Falcons, OC. Arthur Smith has been around in the NFL. And Ryan Day is now flanked by a couple of former NFL coordinators as he seeks to return to the national championship game. And boy, if I were Arthur Smith, I can't imagine a better place to be. There's a generally agreed upon, I think, understanding that the coaching in the NFL and the scheme that you're able to run up there, because you have much older, more experienced guys, is more complex. And it's why there are more points scored in college football than there are in the NFL. Defenses are much better up there. So Arthur Smith, whatever you may think of him, and I know plenty of fans in the NFL that have their own thoughts on what he was as a play caller up there. I don't believe it has a significant bearing on how much success he can have at Ohio State. Matt Patricia's defense this year was outstanding. What was his reputation like? Chip Kelly won a national championship in 2024. He didn't even make it through a full season in the NFL immediately after that. So the leagues are bordering on being two different sports to the point where a guy like that, who maybe he does want to be an NFL head coach one day, and he thinks Ohio State's a place to do it, at the very least, Arthur Smith is going to have a good time. He's got Julian Sayin at quarterback, no legal troubles there. He's got Jeremiah Smith on the perimeter. What more do you want? You got one of the most talented rosters in the country. It landed weird with me initially. And then I thought about it and went, wait a minute. Nick Saban flopped in the NFL and then came and made the greatest dynasty in the history of college football. Is Curt Cignetti making the next one? For those thoughts, revisit segment 1 on today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.